when I was your age, I got inspired to look up at the world of astronomy. So I'm just curious, before we begin the talk, can you put your hand up? How many of you have looked up at the night sky? Seen the stars and the constellations? Wow! If that's a true engagement of numbers, that is very impressive and I love to see it. So throughout this talk, I'll talk through my own personal journey that connects astronomy and photography. But for this talk, it doesn't matter whatever your interest is. It could be gaming, it could be sports. It's to show you that if you take it further, things like this might well happen to you. So here's my journey. So it's quite a long-winded title, so forgive me. A local, internationally acclaimed, award-winning landscape astrophotographer. What a mouthful. So I've been very fortunate, as is highlighted just now, that I've had image endorsements by NASA, Apollo 11, alongside the European Space Agency, whilst working with some of the latest photographic brands. But also what is called a night sky conservationist. I'll talk about it briefly in a second, but the amount of school children now I see not having the privilege to look up at the night sky is immense. So to see so many numbers of you saying that you have seen the stars, it brings a sigh of relief, quite frankly, so it's lovely to see. So this is what I've been lucky enough to work with since the age of 7 years old. These are just some of the brands and titles I've been lucky enough to work with, from the likes of BBC Television and the ITV, to major photographic publications of the United Kingdom, and further afield as well. So in the talk today, I want to try and make it as engaging for you as possible. Every single one of you in the room have taken time today, out of your day, to hear me speak. So I want it to be engaging for all of you. So I'll show you what it takes to be a landscape astrophotographer, and in the second part, I'll show you one of my recent projects, which involved travelling 14,000 miles across the world. So the first image, here, in the top left, is the earliest image I could find when I was 10 years old. This is the closest I can relate to you guys, so it's a privilege talking with you now. But this is when I was inspired by science fiction stories, which were on like CBBC when I was 7. And it was about this curiosity for life on other worlds. And I thought, hang on a minute, I really want to see these things through a telescope. And on my birthday, my mum got me a telescope. I looked up and found that you can see moons orbiting around other planets, like Jupiter and Saturn, these really famous worlds. I want to bring a caveat into this. When I was your age, I took photographs through a telescope, and I took a book with me into school, a photo journal. I was bullied for doing it. And so my key piece of advice is for anybody who has an interest, whether, as I said, it could be textiles, it could be sports, you name it, to hold on to those interests, because they are what make you, you. It took me through an education, eventually to studying a photography degree at the University of the West of England, graduating with first-class honours, and now pursuing a career as what's called a freelance astrophotographer. Freelance is when you build your own career path and shape it how you want it to, just to make you aware. So when I was around, say, 15 or so, I took these images. And just to explain to you what is going on, these are events that happen in the night sky, so they are called eclipses. It's to do with the interaction of the sun and the moon. So the top image is when the moon, if you imagine, goes in front of the sun. Adverse, or the opposite, for the moon, when it slips into the Earth's shadow. And just when you read up about this stuff, whether you go to Waterstone, to W.H. Smith, you pick up a book and you think, how do you take these images? And just by reading, by just doing some online resources, you guys can certainly do it with YouTube nowadays, you can learn how to take images like these. And I took it upon myself to do it. It's been very fortunate enough as well to travel to other parts or other countries to see this, the Northern Lights. Have any of you been lucky enough to see the Northern Lights? Put your hands up if you have. Cool. I'm going to gauge that as about just under 50% of the room have seen them. Wow, that's really good. They are, if you have seen them, they are a phenomenal sight to see. And it's just been fortunate to see some of the science going on behind these things. And to be honest, they just look visually stunning. So being lucky enough to travel the world to see those. But these events as well, this is another type of eclipse. This is known as a total solar eclipse. So this is when, for a matter of minutes, day turns to night. And so in 2017, I travelled to the United States to witness my first experience of a total solar eclipse. It's the most eerie phenomenon in space and gives you a window of opportunity to see some really cool things happening with the sun. That glow that you see around the moon is actually the sun's outer atmosphere. It's called the chromosphere and the corona. And you can observe it for only a few minutes at that crucial time. But it was this image which really saw the beginning of things. I had just started my university degree by this point at 18, and I took this photograph. Now, for those of you, I'm pretty certain you've been there. Put your hand up if you've been to Glastonbury Tour. Yeah, fair few of you have, that's good to see. So may I draw your attention to the sun in that photograph? When you see the sunset normally, it's like a normal circular object as it sets on the local horizon. It's different in this picture. I witnessed something weird going on. It's an optical phenomenon that I soon learned to be called the green flash. It was recognised for a major photography competition known as Astronomy Photographer of the Year. It is the biggest of its kind, hosted in London at the Royal Observatory, and my name there in publication amongst some of the greats of astrophotography. Wow. And these are just some of the images going back through the archives, being photographed with some big names in astronomy. For those of you, I'm certain you remember BBC's The Sky at Night with Sir Patrick Moore. You might know his name, yeah? This man on the right took over his footsteps, Professor Chris Lintott, the co-presenter of The Sky at Night. That was a big moment. And then I look like a lost lemon with two heads in a room full of people. And you're lost, you're beginning your journey, and you're mixing with people who know what they're talking about. You feel somewhat lost, and you're trying to make a name for yourself. But we, as creatives, we push through to other things. But I'm sure you guys will sadly remember lockdown with COVID in 2020. You know, it was a very difficult time, and I'm glad that you guys got through it also. But for me, it was during this time I hosted a talk similar to this, and at the time a friend came along to that talk, rushing about, only 10 minutes to set up, going from one job to the next, to do the talk and to see people already coming in the door. And for them to then say, at the end of this talk, I was rushing about, Josh, that was the most disappointing talk you've ever done. I'm really disappointed in you. Those words are literally plastered along my head, because that's when I gave up astrophotography for 6 months. 6 months later, I took this photograph. It's of a beautiful stone circle in Scotland. And with my own interest in astronomy, I learned that these ancient sites, or stone circles, bear astronomical connections. That was the first reason for going there. But this photograph, you know, I picked up my camera for the first time in a while, and the bag was covered in a layer of dust. It was like being reunited with an old friend. You take an image having no idea really what you're doing, getting used to it. It's recognised for that international photography competition. And you think, what on earth was that all about? You go giving something up and then you go even higher than you were before. This was insane. It was what I call a resurgence in photography. So that for anybody, bring back, reigniting your ambition again. But it meant exploring new territories, taking photographs of things which I hadn't really done before. Like in this image, there's a distant galaxy you can actually see with your own eyes. From here on the Mendips, I've seen it. And a comet as well. I thought, wow, this is bracing new turf here. But then, as I said, it involves travelling. So last year was one of the most observed solar eclipses in humanity, which was visible from the United States once again on the April the 8th, 2024. So for that, I was trying to go to Dallas in Texas. You guys might know that from the television program. And it was meant to be the best place for clear skies. Unfortunately, it wasn't too great for the time we were out there. When you go to Bristol Airport, and then you're trying to get a flight from Dublin in Ireland and out to Dallas. The flight's cancelled 2 days before. What do? You panic, you're rushing with adrenaline, only to find that by persistence and motivation to get yourself out on a flight the day before the solar eclipse to witness this. The beautiful diamond ring, those moments before the moon is totally eclipsed. These are phenomenal events, even more so when you have BBC's The One Show reporting to you saying, Josh, bring whatever material you can back to London. That is a spine-tingling moment when that happens, I must say. This was the end result, the Lone Star Eclipse, as it's now known, from the county or the state of Texas, which is known as the Lone Star State. What an interesting narrative, because our sun is at the centre of our solar system, planets surrounding it. It is a lone star in our part of the universe. And to photograph this from the Lone Star State, what a narrative. It didn't matter if the weather wasn't good. What place to be for this eclipse? But even on a more local scale, Cheddar Gorge, we know this place very close to our doorstep, experimenting from the top of the gorge, taking these images of the winter constellations. Not that I recommend going up Cheddar Gorge at night unless you know what you're doing, but the image quality on this was exceptional. But you've only got to look to Cheddar in the distance, where you see that glow on the horizon, where this worry of light pollution becomes a concern. Even to more rare events. So these here, happening in the image, is a meteor shower. This happens every single year during August. And you can see up to 100 meteors, under good conditions, every single hour. And it was just so that the northern lights would make a comeuppance as well. So to photograph this from Corfe Castle, down in Dorset, was a real treat. I hope this talk is opening your eyes to what you can really see in the night sky. It's becoming hip, it's becoming trendy. More people wanting to observe the aurora. This night is on a location called Knowlton Hedge in Dorset. And I'll tell you, when I took this photograph, there was another photographer who did a head count. Over 100 photographers at this location to get this image. That was pressure, if there ever was one. Then going back to the roots, thinking about life on other worlds, what I told you about before. I like to interact with my audiences, so put your hands up, guys. Who believes there is life somewhere out there in the universe? Come on. Yeah. All right. So we're looking at about 50% of the room who believe that life exists amongst the stars. So how do we observe that with our existence on Earth? We use observatories. We study wavelengths of light to distinguish these things. And so when taking my images, I want that story to come across, as in this example. But as I said before, this lady here, she's known as Dr. Maggie Adaring-Pocock, a brilliant advocate for inspiring youngsters to look up at the stars. She is also a presenter of that programme, The Sky at Night, and had the privilege to host an interview on BBC's The One Show for that solar eclipse I mentioned. A real treat and an honour it was. Even on local news, on the ITV, speaking to friends and presenters, who broadcast across the southwest, a major opportunity. And then, before you get carried away with this, when you look at the title of this spread, you will think, cringe. What does this mean? David Bowie's Starman? After I did those interviews, I was walking through the city of Bath, and a woman's eyes were fixated on me as I was just walking by. And I thought, do I have a second head? Do I look like a lemon? And it so turns out, as she walked by, she said, "That's the Starman." A name now latched on, as it was in this piece for a major photography outlet magazine publication of up to 30 million people, forgive me. Incredible. Even broadcasting to BBC's The World Service. This is what happens, guys, for your interest. If you put yourselves out there enough, things will happen. People will know your name more so. And so that's what I want to try and do through this talk, is whatever it might be, if you push yourself just a little bit further, things like this can happen. This image on the screen, however, really shook things up. In April last year, I took this photograph of the iconic landmark that is Stonehenge. I'm pretty certain you guys have been to that one, so I won't ask you to put hands up this time. But it is known to bear astronomical significance. So when taking this photograph of this meteor shower, I had no idea what was about to come. It was endorsed by NASA in the United States. A couple of days later, European Space Agency astronaut Tim Peake, who represents the United Kingdom Space Agency, latched onto the image. It was phenomenal. But the even worse thing about it was I had tickets booked to see him in Bath just a few months later. So I thought, well, let's take some ambition here. If I, do a print-off of that picture, which he has shared on his platforms, let's have a go trying to get a picture with Tim Peake. After 3 rounds of security checks to go to a stage similar like this, seeing him jump off the stage and to say, with a handshake, "Josh, good to see you," on first name basis with an astronaut who's been to space. Wow, that image is just priceless. That was not, though, the cherry on the cake. This was. On a Friday afternoon, I was having a gin and tonic, as you do. Some of you guys will come to know what that is in due course. But it was when I was watching the local news, I had a friend message me, say, "Josh, you need to look at this." This post was shared by a man who is the second to stand on the surface of another world on the moon, Major Buzz Aldrin of Apollo 11. When I saw this news come through on Twitter, I was crying, because this news is just massive. To think that someone who had been on another world takes an interest in someone's image from Somerset. This is nuts, this is insane. So, to see all of this happening was huge. And honestly, the broadcast this image had was huge. Scientific contributions to the journal Nature. This is a big outlet for scientific research. BBC News, to mention that, and just a couple of others. My university, UWE. Guys, if you ever consider university when you get older, look at this as a viable option. It's a good one to go for in our region. Even Sky News, just the opportunities were endless. CBS News in America, it just went everywhere. But there is a core message behind these images. For me, they're not just pretty pictures. This is the state of our country right now. This map measures the amount of artificial light at night. So for regions which are red, they are where we have the most intense light pollution, from London to Bristol, Manchester to Birmingham. And it's those poor souls of your generation who cannot see the stars. They can't see them because it's too much light. But for you guys who put your hands up at the beginning of this talk, I hope this makes you realise how privileged you are to see the night. And so these images, I hope, inspire people to make change. As another avenue to this, I've been fortunate to be enacted as a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. So this means taking it further afield, going with groups of like-minded people to government, to ministers, MPs, to say we need to act now. We have generations here who will never see the night sky unless we do something about it. Every year, so much money is wasted up in the night sky, and we can be using that for other things. So to have this crucial opportunity in government was huge. But then again, even working with some of the photographic brands, just as another sidetrack to this story, just to showcase why certain equipment for photography is good to take photographs of the stars, and has even led to opportunities like today, speaking with an audience. I never had that privilege once before. And so it just means you're growing from strength to strength. This is the reminder that, whether you like painting, as I said before, or graphic design, push yourself more and more. Even to Sigma. Now, I know this is a name some of you relate to, Sigma. Yeah, made some of you laugh. I'm going to hold your attention for just a moment. Thank you. So Sigma is a company that produces some of the most cutting-edge lenses in the world. And to become a creative ambassador for that brand was a big piece of news. But I said about with light pollution, you guys of your generation might well know these names, like SpaceX and Amazon. They are launching satellites into the night sky in our atmosphere. Right now, in space, from where we are here in the UK, we can see 4,000 visible stars. But this year, there's going to be over 50,000 satellites in orbit. This image on the left here shows the impact they will have on the night sky. I took this photograph on the Mendips, and it just shows you how our view of the night sky will change within a generation. Yes, they are used to produce internet. We thrive by it now in our modern day and age. But it's also looking at the double-edged sword of protecting our natural resource, as our ancestors did at Stonehenge and way before that. Lunar eclipses as well, which are observed from the top of the Mendips, but this is something really big. Back in April last year, I learned that I had secured a book deal. 52 assignments on night photography. The aim of this title is to inspire like-minded people like you in the audience, whether it be with a mobile phone or a digital camera, just to have a go and take a photograph of the night sky and to enjoy it. And so guys, that comes from motivation, perseverance, and love for your subject. And if you carry it on up, it will lead to things. So for this book to hit the shelves of Waterstones, WH Smith's and Amazon, I couldn't ask for a much greater outreach to inspire others. I'll cover this very quickly because that was a large portion to cover, but a recent project which was undertaken at a place, an island, in the middle of South America, or rather the Pacific Ocean, called Easter Island. This is a famous island known for these heads, moai statues. So the Pacific Ring of Fire. That happened on the 2nd of October 2024. So I'll go through this in stages so it's easier to understand. The last dramatic solar eclipse to occur from this small island in the Pacific would be the last to occur in 312 years. You guys are at the beginning of your journey now. Imagine living it 3 times to see this view. On the right hand side of the screen you can see this ring. This is what this eclipse would look like when the moon appears just a bit smaller than the sun in its orbit. This was the photograph with our friend on the island from one of the most famous panoramic vistas the island has to offer, which is known as Rapa Nui, Tapito Te Hanua, the navel of the world. But during this trip, I was fortunate to photograph one of these statues with a comet. Comets, guys, are some of the oldest objects of our solar system. To be precise, it is thought this comet last visited our solar system 80,000 years ago. For it to be seen above a statue known as the Traveller, and we also think about celestial visitors to our solar system. It really is an eye-opener when telling stories to produce a strong body of work. But here we go. Eclipse Day was among us. We were there with our friend, and if it wasn't for him, we were able to access a very restricted area of the island. I'm sure you guys know about UNESCO, World Heritage. That was involved here. Very difficult, but he made it happen. And there we are, setting up moments before this eclipse happened. Look at the sky! It's water-wall blue, clear skies. You're almost guaranteed to see it. And I thought, I've been waiting for this. And before I know it, you're getting emails through on a mobile phone from major outlets in the astronomy community. This is one of them, space.com, with again an outreach of 13 million people or so. And you're broadcasting from this small island in the middle of nowhere to the world. That was astonishing. Just to throw in a couple of images there, just acting a bit naive and what have you, taking images of this phenomenon. And also the amount of people, there was not many people watching this eclipse. And there's one of those heads, those statue things there on the screen. But most importantly, and I think this applies to any of your interests, okay? This man, my friend, helped me get the photograph I'm about to show you on the screen. But I wanted to give something back in return to them. And as we speak now, sending off postal tubes of these images to the Easter Island people so that they have a legacy for the future. This image in particular, I just wanted to highlight on this one first, captures that shadow as it interacts with the Earth. This was taken from space. This was that moment right there on your screen. This was the picture. So this image, which I eventually called the Pacific Ring of Fire, I'd like to talk through it with you briefly. So we have an event which is called a Pacific Ring of Fire, or rather an annular solar eclipse. You see that happening above this statue, the moai. My friend informed me it has a name called Ahi Renga, right? When translated into English, it means fire flames. What a coincidence, a ring of fire eclipse above fire flames, the moai. But why, Josh? On the moai's neck, you can kind of see it in this image, but there's actually ancient graffiti on his neck, art, rock art, and it depicts fire. On his shoulder, you can just make out a carving, which is the island's deity or god, known as Maki Maki. This particular marking showed this statue was used as a prototype for the creation of future statues. The story here was immense, all there choreographed in one moment. Just one word, wow. That was the moment, the big peak of the eclipse, when the moon is just a bit smaller than the sun, and not to happen again in our lifetimes. But again, leading to new opportunities. This is something for all of you guys. If you get to know people in your circles, they can help you. One of my dreams, and this is a key word here, dreams, was to capture these images at night with the Milky Way above these statues. People, you need them on your journey to help you on their way. That's why I say give something back in return. You know, even in my experience, whether it's people serving you food at a restaurant to people checking you in at a hotel, I have never met such kindness and generosity ever, ever. This could be the only time I see it, but that was phenomenal. The weirdest thing though was, you're about to go on the plane back home, and that woman, you can see her there on the left, she was just staring at me in the airport. You know, you're sat down on one of these chairs, you're waiting for your plane, and she's just staring. She walks on over and says, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to trouble you, but are you Josh Dury?" What? This is in the middle of nowhere, and she saw that space article which I showed you. And I just think, the outreach of this is something else, it's phenomenal. So yeah, it meant a lot to me, that picture, and also further recognition the image got. As in with the scientific journal, it was picked up by that one, but what I was really fortunate with, guys, it was recognised for a second time by NASA. And this image here, capturing the Milky Way, which I titled Aringa Ora Ote Tabuna, which translated into English means the living face of the ancestors. What a contribution that title makes. So,